Hi there, my name's Simon Drew, and I'd like to welcome you to the Practical Stoic Podcast, where I give you practical Stoic advice for modern times. If you'd like to learn more about Stoicism, or if you want some added inspiration in your day, just go to my website. It's risetothegoodlife.com. If you're interested in transforming your life with Stoic principles, then I also offer one-on-one coaching. To book your first free session, just head to risetothegoodlife.com/coaching and follow the links. But for now, enjoy this episode. Hi there, my name's Simon Drew, and welcome to another episode of the Practical Stoic Podcast. Now, today is a very, very special episode because it's the first interview that I've done for this podcast, and our guest is none other than the amazing Ryan Holiday. And most of you would know Ryan Holiday as the author of many books that have to do with Stoicism, like The Obstacle is the Way and Ego is the Enemy. But to give you some more perspective on what he's been able to achieve in his life so far, because he really is an incredible person, I'll give you a little bit of a backstory. So Ryan Holiday is a strategist and writer. He dropped out of college at 19 to apprentice under Robert Greene, the author of the 48 Laws of Power. And later he served as the director of marketing for American Apparel at age 21. His company, Brass Check, has advised clients like Google and Complex, as well as many prominent best-selling authors. And aside from being a marketing genius, he's also authored many best-selling books, most of which you will know, including The Obstacle is the Way, Ego is the Enemy, The Daily Stoic, and also, more recently, The Daily Stoic Journal. Ryan's work has been extremely influential in spreading the word of Stoicism to NFL coaches, world-class athletes, TV personalities, political leaders, and others around the world. So as I'm sure you can all understand, I've been so excited to actually have Ryan on the show ever since the idea came up. And I'm so excited now that you guys get to listen to this because he dropped so much value into this interview. And before I do start the interview, I just want to apologize from the bottom of my heart because I recorded this over Skype. We did the interview because obviously he's in Texas and I'm in Australia. But Skype has undergone some changes recently and I didn't fully check all of the recording software. And so my end of the recording is quite fuzzy and a bit too loud. And so it doesn't sound quite right. So I hope it doesn't ruin the interview for you because Ryan sounds just fine, but I just wanted to apologize for that. So anyway, I hope you really enjoy this episode. Let me know what you think, and let me know if there are any other people in the future who you'd like to hear from in an interview on this podcast. But for now, enjoy the show. So in today's episode, we have the one and only Ryan Holiday, and I honestly couldn't ask for a better first guest for this show, and so I'm really excited to have him here. So Ryan, welcome to the show. It's great to have you here.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, it's good to be here, but we're very far apart, but otherwise it's good to chat.
Absolutely. And Ryan, I get a lot of emails and messages from my listeners, and honestly, a disproportionate number of those people say that they first discovered Stoicism by reading your books, whether it was Ego is the Enemy or The Obstacle is the Way or The Daily Stoic. And your work is obviously having a massive impact on the world. And, you know, you're doing so much to spread Stoicism. So I really couldn't ask for a better person to have as my first actual guest on the show. But for the three people out there who may not know about you yet, why don't you just give us a bit of an overview of who you are and what you do?
Sure. This is always a tough question for me because both my interests and my sort of career is somewhat varied. But I started in marketing. I was the director of marketing for a company called American Apparel. I've worked for a number of big brands and authors. That was sort of my day job. But when I was in college, I got introduced to Stoicism, and that it was my sort of personal, private operating system. It was the thing that I was using to manage the craziness and chaos and difficulty of not only my job, but of where I sat in relation to that job. You know, I was the director of marketing of a publicly traded company around the time I turned 21. So it was a lot very early, and Stoicism was sort of there for me. And I started a blog in 2005 or 2006, and I just sort of talked about what I was going through. I had this sort of small cult-like following. And then I wrote a book about marketing called Trust Me, I'm Lying. There's sort of an expose of fake news and how media manipulation works, sort of tearing back the curtain on public relations. And then as I sort of sat down and thought, what do I want to write about next? I was in the luxury, I was in the privileged position of being able to choose what I wanted to write about. And so I said, I want to write about this thing that's helped me a great deal, this ancient philosophy. And so that became my next book, which was The Obstacle is the Way. And I tried to, I'd read pretty much everything on Stoicism, both primary and secondary. And so I sort of sat down and thought, how can I do something that no one else has done? How can I do something that is value additive? And The Obstacle is the Way is basically it's basically one exercise from Marcus Aurelius, illustrated with stories from history and business. And so it's had the effect that you said, which is that it's been read, I would say, primarily by people who have no experience or interest in philosophy at the outset. And so it's been this cool experience of bringing a large amount of people to this community that I had long, personally been a member of.
Mm. And I love what you say there about people who might not have had an interest in philosophy now becoming interested in Stoicism, because honestly, that was one of the main things that brought me to Stoicism, this idea that it's not a philosophy about just talking about the meaning of words or getting into esoterical discussions. It's actually just a very practical philosophy that says the only purpose of what we're telling you right now is to make your life better. That's all it is. And that's the purpose of all philosophy. But I think we've lost that purpose over time. And this is the perfect time in history to actually be bringing this really practical philosophy back to life and to be showing people that this is what philosophy is all about. It's to better your life. It's not about these long-winded discussions. It's about how can we actually improve your day today. And
sure. I mean, I have a line in one of the books where I basically am saying that sort of the phrase Stoic philosophy, there's almost no more unappealing phrase that you could come up with, right? Like even in the title of this podcast, like when people hear Stoic, they think either they either think emotionlessness or they think an ancient philosophy that I'm vaguely familiar with, and both those things sort of don't they're only interesting to a relatively small segment of the population. And I happen to be a member of that segment of the population. But I think the reason the books have done well and the reason why they've had the impact that they've had is that from my marketing background, I was able to separate my personal, outlook and view from the vast majority of other people. And so I was able to, it was obvious to me that most people don't wake up and think, you know what I'm really interested in, or what would really be helpful right now? Philosophy. What they say is like, I have problems, or I'm struggling with X, Y, or Z, and I'd like help with that, or I need a solution to that. And it just doesn't occur to them that philosophy of any kind, let alone Stoicism, is potentially a solution to that problem. And that's what I've tried to do in my writing, is to sort of eliminate that notion.
Absolutely. And I think you've done an amazing job of that, as you can see from the results that people are getting from reading your books. And I wanted to ask you this next question based around this week's Wednesday episode, because every Wednesday now I do a podcast where I basically ask my audience a question and they're supposed to answer to me, and then I put that answer in the episode. And this week's question is, tell us about your conversion story to Stoicism. It's a bit of a religious term, but I was wondering, you already said that you learned about Stoicism first in university or college. And so I was wondering, could you tell us about that conversion story? Like, was it a professor or a friend who showed that to you?
Well, I think it goes a little bit to just how bad a job universities do as far as Stoicism is concerned, because I was in college when I learned about Stoicism, but me learning about it had nothing to do with college. I remember I was taking a course called Philosophy 101, The Meaning of Life. It was an honors seminar at the college I went to in California. And so we were learning Aristotle and Camus and all these other philosophers, no mention of Stoicism whatsoever. And I happened to attend a conference. I was a journalist for the college, and I attended this conference. And it was this little private event, and I went up to the speaker, who's someone I'd admired for a long time, that I'd been a fan of actually as a kid. And I said, hey, I'm a big fan. I know you're a big reader. What books are you reading right now that you would recommend someone like me read? And he said, I'm reading this philosopher Epictetus, and it's really interesting, and I think you would like it. And so I went back to my hotel room, and I bought Epictetus. I bought the Sharon Lebell translation of The Art of Living, and I bought the Gregory Hayes translation of Marcus Aurelius, which had also been was like tied to it on Amazon, I think is what it was. And I remember the name Marcus Aurelius was more familiar to me because I'd seen the movie Gladiator. And so I bought both those. Marcus Aurelius came first, and I read it and I remember very vividly sitting in my apartment in Riverside, California, and reading Marcus Aurelius, and it just being, so I'd read a decent amount of philosophy up until that point, but this was just utterly different than everything else I'd read, in the sense that like I could actually understand what this person was talking about. Do you know what I mean? Like It was so direct and straightforward, and it actually felt weirdly like it was written to a college student. I remember reading the opening passage of book 5 where he talks about, just like struggling to get out of bed in the morning and wanting to just sleep in. And I was like, that was my life,
Yeah.
It was just so, it was both so profound, but then also so practical at the same time, that it just, it just hit me exactly where I was and exactly where I needed it to hit me at that time. And it's sort of been off to the races since.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love what you're saying there about it seeming very, very practical while you're reading it, because I say this to my audience. I say this to anybody who I talk to over email or message. I say, like, the thing that's great about all of these books is if you find the right translation that is easier to read in this modern language, then it really will seem like they're talking to you. And you can pick it up 10, 20 times, and every time you'll get something different for your life right now. And so as you know, this podcast is all about the practicality of Stoicism. So I know that my listeners would really love to know about how you've used Stoicism in your life. So could you possibly give us like 2 or 3 Stoic practices that you've found to be most useful?
So I think the biggest one the biggest, easiest one for people would just be the idea of journaling. Mm-hmm. If you think about what Meditations for Marcus Aurelius is, it's that he's writing notes to himself. So, blogging to me was a form of journaling, and I did it almost daily and weekly for many, many years. Now I journal in notebooks, and actually we made a daily Stoic journal. And in terms of practicality, I'll give you a good example. The prompt in the Daily Stoic Journal on Saturday was talking about sort of what's in your control, what's not in your control, and the anxiety that we often feel when we're desiring something that's outside of our control. And I'm in the middle of working on something on one of my books, and my next book. And we're trying to sort of arrange this thing on the marketing side of things. And so we were hoping that this sort of big named person would appear in one of the events. And it's sort of been back and forth. Yes, he's going to do it. No, he's not going to do it. And there's a lot writing on it. And I was writing in the journal to myself sort of a reminder of how, look, whether this person says yes or no is outside my control. And I was sort of listing the things that were in my control, what I wanted to focus on, how actually I'm in an extremely fortunate position, how if he says no, I'm still way ahead of where I thought I would be at this point. And literally I'm mid-sentence doing this exercise, and the person calls me and cancels. And so we get the final no. And so, to me, it was just a reminder, this is this philosophy I've been practicing for, 10 plus years now. It's actually a practice, right? It's not this thing you magically do. You magically know. It's something you do. And it was really helpful for me in that moment to be actually having to remind myself of this thing, and then to have sort of fate intervene and test me on the very thing that I was talking to myself about in that moment. And then, I feel like it worked, right? Like, I feel like they took the news in stride. I hung up the phone and I got back to doing the work that I could do. And so to me, obviously journaling's a big one. I carry, I talk about this too, and this it's going to sound like I'm just talking about things that I make, but I carry one coin in my pocket that's got a quote from Marcus Aurelius that's about the sort of ephemerality of life, how instantly and fragile our existence can turn out to be, sort of a reminder of our mortality, which is a very sort of practical Stoic exercise. And then in the other pocket, I have a coin that is also featuring an idea from Marcus Aurelius, this idea of amor fati, embracing the things that happen, that we can sort of have this unstoppable force within us that absorbs the negative and turns it into a positive. And so it's, again, I think I like about Stoicism what you like, which is that it really is this thing that you can be interacting with in the course of your existence on a daily basis. It's not this thing just trapped in books.
Absolutely. I completely agree. And look, I love that you're talking about these things that you've created, because honestly, if I look at the things that I'm trying to create with my blog or the podcast and everything, every time I bring something to the world, it's something that I really haven't found, but I really want to be there. And sure. I see the same with your work. And so I think it's completely natural that you would want to, point people towards things that you just really wanted to see there, you wanted to have out here to remind you of these principles. So you just brought it to the world. And those are extremely useful Stoic life hacks, you might call them. Especially the memento mori. I've found that to be just such an incredible reminder every day, even to the point where I've considered a tattoo, but then I thought, well, maybe Stoicism isn't going to be so popular in the future. I'll look like an idiot, but no, I don't think that'll be the case. But
well, yeah, you don't get the tattoo because you think it will look good. Get it because it's functional.
Exactly.
Totally. I do try to make things like, for instance, so we have dailystoic.com, which is sort of the website I've built around these things. And the reason we don't sell T-shirts is that I don't think T-shirts are valuable, right? The T-shirts don't do anything for me. Maybe they do something for other people, but they don't do anything for me. And so we've tried to make things that are really functional and valuable, that tie into the philosophy in the sense that they make the philosophy tangible, I guess, is the idea.
Yeah. And I was actually going to ask you about the Daily Stoic Journal later on in the podcast, but I was going to ask you about how journaling can help you in life to become closer with Stoicism and everything, but you've already answered that. But I did want to say that a large number of people who I talk to who listen to my podcast have said that they've been using the Stoic Journal and it's been extremely helpful. So I want to thank you for bringing that out as well, because I think it's something that really needed to be here. And I wanted to ask, could you tell us about a time when Stoicism and these Stoic principles have helped you to get out of a bad situation or to come back from a failure?
Sure. I would say on the one hand, I feel blessed in that the failures or difficulties that I've faced have been, let's call them first world difficulties. And one of the weird parts of writing the books is the people that I've heard from that have gone through these sort of either horrendous or just deeply difficult trying things that sort of make my own experiences pale in comparison. And so one reason I'm reluctant to answer that question is that I try not to cheapen the material. Like I don't want to be talking about, a breakup that I went through in college that, Stoicism was very helpful for, when it sort of pales in comparison to someone, who lost a leg or, saw their Olympic hopes go up in smoke, things like that. I feel like on a very real practical day-to-day level, Stoicism is this sort of even keel for me. So, I'll give you an example. Both The Obstacle is the Way and Ego is the Enemy objectively sold enough copies to hit the New York Times bestseller list, but mysteriously neither of them were there. So on the one hand, I picked this because it's a good example of sort of what I think Stoicism is great at. So on the one hand, really great success, right? Like sold more copies than I thought. It's financially lucrative, reaching lots of people. It's sort of had a great, let's say, opening week. So on the one hand, I think without a Stoicism, that can puff you up. Like, hey, I'm great. This great thing happened to me. The Stoics would say that good fortune is just as needs to be guarded against just as much as bad fortune. And then what happens in books is, it comes out and then it's not until about 10 days later that you find out whether you hit the list for the previous week. And so we check and it's not there. This is in some ways deeply unfair. It sort of defies explanation, but it's not there. And so on the other hand, do you suddenly pity yourself? Are you sad? Are you crying about it? Do you feel like you've been ripped off? Are you angry? I think Stoicism is there also with the same even keel, right? It's just like, look, I wrote a book that I'm proud of. I'm proud of the effort that I put into the marketing. I'm proud of the people that I reached. And I'm not gonna think about it either way, whether I got what I deserved or didn't get what I deserved. I'm gonna focus on the next thing. And so I think just the life of being an author, or in some ways a public figure, is a life that is going to inherently have its ups and downs. And I think Stoicism, the reason Stoicism was popular with or was so integral to someone like Marcus Aurelius or a Seneca, is that their lives featured the same sort of inherent ups and downs, and a philosophy that sort of girds you for that is really essential.
Absolutely, and I really appreciate that answer, and I love that you prefaced it with mentioning that you really don't feel like you've had these catastrophic problems in your life, because I honestly believe that one of the things that practicing Stoicism does is it allows you to have more gratitude for your life, and it also allows you to have a much greater perspective of what is a problem and what is not. And even just from reading the books, I mean, I've seen that in my own life with the things that I have gotten angry at in the past, and how in the future, these days would not even enter my mind to become angry over those same things. But I know in your email, so you have an email list that people can subscribe to on your website. And you recently mentioned how some people think that it's kind of cheesy to say like Stoic life hacks, but you actually think that they're actually a really great way to become introduced to Stoicism and also to use it in your life. So I was wondering if you could maybe tell us about your favorite Stoic life hack.
That's a great question. I'm not sure if I have a favorite. I think one of the easiest and most interesting is just this idea of negative visualization, right? The Stoics would say, look, don't envision it going perfectly well. Envision it going horribly awry. and be prepared for that, and have a plan B. The number of people that I talk to, whether it's they're working on a book or they're launching a company, and you talk to them about how it's going to go, it almost doesn't occur to them that it will go any way other than the way they want it to go. And the Stoics would say this is terribly naive, and likely to set one up for disappointment. And so I think on a very simple level, just this idea of negative visualization is really, really great.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And that is absolutely being spread around the world at the moment. I mean, especially with what Tim Ferriss put out on his TED Talk and everything like that. I mean, it's just this idea, and it doesn't seem like a negative thing to do anymore. You might have in the past been said to have been someone who is very negative if you think like that, but now it's a very effective tool that we see, and so thanks for sharing that. So I wanted to ask, because I know you recently moved down to Texas, and you were in New York City before that. Is that right?
Yeah, I've lived all over, but I moved to Texas basically from New York.
And so I kind of wanted to know, like, now that you live sort of on a farm or a ranch in Texas, do you feel like moving out of a city and into the countryside, or having that nature close by, and I know you have animals there as well, do you feel like that alignment with nature has brought you closer to Stoicism and has allowed you to understand it a bit more?
Well, there's certainly a Stoic connection to farming and to country life. Rome, although we sort of see it as this place of palaces and, amphitheaters and beautiful buildings, was also a horrendous, disgusting place, particularly in the summer. And so in Marcus Aurelius and Seneca, you hear of them, basically fleeing the city as often as they can to a country estate of some kind. Now, obviously, this is something available only to the wealthy at the time. But I do feel that this idea of being connected to nature, there being less noise, there being less going on, there being a sort of, the Stoics talk about living in accordance with nature. That's not quite what they meant, but living a slightly less artificial life. And part of, modern civilization is by definition artificial, has been really, really valuable. I think it's provided more time for reflection and quiet, and it's just also disconnected me from things that, like, there's no fear of missing out here because I don't even know what's going on. And so that's been very beneficial.
Yeah, awesome. I love that. If you could bring one Stoic from the past back to life and take them out to coffee, who would it be and why? I'm a huge Marcus Aurelius fan. Obviously, I think that would be me. That's who I would want to meet. I think it's just sort of one of these incredibly unique historical figures. But if you told me I could only meet Seneca, I don't think I'd be disappointed either. I think they're just two of the most interesting, human beings of all time. I completely agree. Yeah, awesome. Now, a lot of the listeners to this podcast have only recently been introduced to Stoicism. And so I actually asked them all if they had any questions that they wanted to ask. And one of the ones that was coming up was, like, which books or resources would you recommend to somebody who is only just starting to learn about Stoicism? So
obviously the originals, Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, Epictetus are really, really important. I like Gregory Hayes' translation for Marcus Aurelius. I like the Penguin Classics translation for Epictetus, as well as the Sharon Lebell translation if you're really, really getting, trying to dip your toe in the waters. For Seneca, I like the Penguin translations. Tim Ferriss has a really good audio translation that's free. As far as next steps, I would urge people to read Pierre Hadot. He's a French philosopher. He's no longer with us, but he wrote a wonderful book about Marcus Aurelius called The Inner Citadel. that it's sort of an extended sort of analysis and explanation of the meditations. And then also he has a wonderful book called Philosophy as a Way of Life. And those two were really, really influential in my journey to understanding this philosophy at a deep level.
Yeah, awesome. And I know that you do have a reading list on your website as well, so I'm going to include the link to that in the show notes here for everybody as well. But I do have to vouch for what you're saying here, because get every single book that Ryan is telling you to get here, because I had an experience recently where I had only read the version of Meditations. I can't remember what version it was, but it was like swimming against the tide the whole time. It was very, very difficult to fully comprehend everything. And when I read your blog post about which books to read, I went and immediately got that different version, the new libraries or the modern library. And as soon as I started reading it, it was like a breath of fresh air. I was like, this is amazing how much easier it is to actually digest. So thanks for suggesting that. One other question that they were wondering was, I mean, self-discipline is a goal that is kind of a byproduct of studying Stoicism and practicing it. So do you have any sort of Stoic practices that you think really can help you to develop self-discipline? Because I think that is one of the greatest challenges in life.
Yeah. Haruki Murakami, the Japanese writer, has a wonderful book called What I Talk About When I Talk About Running. And he's saying that exercise is both an activity and a metaphor. And I really like that. Basically, he's saying that like running is good because it's good for you, exercise wise, but it's also this opportunity to sort of learn about pushing yourself and learn about pushing your limits and about creating discipline. And so that's, I think, for instance, I remember one of the things I do, like when I'm on a treadmill and I feel like stopping, I speed it up. And it's just sort of this, like it's sort of developing this muscle, not the muscles of your legs, but this muscle that when you feel like stopping, that's your mind putting a thought out there that you also have the ability to override. You're not a slave to that. You're not a slave to that limitation, let's say. And so I think exercise has been really important for me in developing that, in developing that discipline. And I think it's not a coincidence that the Stoics talk quite a bit about wrestling in the Olympics and other forms of exercise.
I completely agree with that, especially as someone who is currently working on getting a Cert 4 in fitness. That's something that I want to help people with, because exercise really, it's so much about the physical, but also like a huge part of it is the mental. And if I could add anything to that, one thing that completely changed my life last year, which I feel has also been helpful, it sounds crazy, but Tim Ferriss recommended cold showers, and I started doing that. And I can definitely say that was something that you have to push past that mental barrier of being uncomfortable for a very short period of time and just do it. And once you do that for a few times, it becomes second nature. But exercise, absolutely, I agree. Now, Ryan, I believe that everyone in the Stoic community should be trying to spread Stoicism as if it were kind of like a religion, because I really think that this philosophy could completely change the world if more people knew about it. And I believe that sometime in the near future, Stoicism could potentially get to the same level of popularity in society as, say, Buddhism or something like that. So as a growth hacking expert, what do you think is one thing that everybody in my audience should do today to bring Stoicism to an even bigger audience?
Yeah, when I spoke at StoicCon 2 years ago, this was something I talked about. Some people in the community are sort of concerned that it's becoming too popular, and it's really reached a fraction of a percent of the potential people that it could reach. I I don't necessarily know if I disagree that we have a sort of evangelical obligation, the way that one might in a religion, but I do think it's a value. I guess the Stoics would say, first off, the best way to convert or to speak the philosophy would be to actually live it. So maybe we don't need more people talking about it or even writing books about it, but we need more people actually sort of living and embodying the ideas. That's the sort of most compelling case you can make for the philosophy. But I do think this very simple idea in Stoicism, this idea that we don't control what happens, but we control how we respond, that's the essence of the philosophy, is probably the simple and easiest entry point into it, and probably the easiest lesson to give to your children, to your friends, to your coworkers, to your spouses, whoever you're trying to. It's a thing that you have to hear like 1,000 times before you can really start applying it. And it's also something you want to see by example. But to me, that's the easiest and most effective sort of selling point of the philosophy. It's just like, I'm going to stop sort of tilting at windmills and trying to change all these things that have nothing to do with me, but I am going to work on my own behavior.
Mm. So it all comes back to personal responsibility and really deciding to just live the principles as opposed to speaking about them. I love that.
Yeah, of course.
And so I want to be respectful of your time, so I just have one more question for you, and your answer to this question could have to do with Stoicism, or it could be completely different. I don't mind, but I just love asking this question of people.
Okay.
And it is this. If you could send one text message to every single person in the world, what would you say?
Put your phone down, probably. Don't read this text message. I think we all get way too many text messages and spend way too much time on our phones, myself included. So I might use my message that way.
Awesome. I absolutely love it. So, Ryan, I've really, really enjoyed our time together. Thank you so much for coming on here. Before we go, do you want to tell our listeners how they can follow your work, or where they can go, how they can get involved in what you're doing right now?
Yeah, sure. So you can go to ryanholiday.net for stuff from me, or you can go to dailystoic.com. We're also at Daily Stoic on Twitter and Instagram, and you can get our daily email. You can get posts we've written. You can see the books that I've done, and I hope they're of value to everyone.
Awesome. And I would feel bad if I didn't give you an opportunity. You said that you've got a book coming out soon. Would you like to tell the audience about that? Or would you like to tell them how they can sort of get on top of that before it comes out?
It's still pretty tightly under wraps, but if you subscribe to the Daily Stoic email, you'll hear about it before anyone else.
Awesome. I love it. So, Ryan, again, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate your time. This has been an absolute pleasure. And look, I'd love to have you back in the future.
Anytime. Thanks for having me.
Love it. Thank you so much. Ciao.
All right.
Hey there. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. What did you guys think? I hope that you really enjoyed this because, as I said, Ryan just dropped so much value into that interview, and I'm so grateful for him coming on the show. And like I said at the start of the interview, look, if you guys have any guests that you'd like to see here in the future, then please hit me up. Let me know who they are, and you know, I'll do my best to get them on the show because I'd love to keep on doing interviews. And once again, I'd like to apologize for the fuzziness of my voice. I really hope it didn't throw you off in the interview, but I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I'll talk to you next time. But until then, I hope that this episode has helped you on your rise to the good life. Ciao. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Practical Stoic Podcast. I hope that you've gotten a lot of value out of it, and I hope that it helps you to live a better life. If you have enjoyed the podcast, then don't forget to subscribe so that you'll be the first to know when there are new episodes. If you really love the podcast, then I would appreciate a positive review, whether that's on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, or wherever else you listen. Don't forget that if you're interested in one-on-one Stoic coaching, then you can head to risetothegoodlife.com/coaching to book your first free session today.